Look, to be honest, I never understand what can be the methodology of such kind of lists besides political and ideological aspects, because in Hungary, media is being totally balanced. If you look at the outlets from the perspective of where they are leaning, let's say they like what the government is doing or they hate what the government is doing, it's around half-half, a little bit more on the opposition side than on the government side.
According to the European Federation of Journalists, some 80% of Hungarian media is owned by companies with close ties either to the ruling party or to Prime Minister Orban himself.
Oh, I wish they were right. I wish they were right. I wish they would be right. It would be much easier for us. I understand that for liberal mainstream it's unacceptable, but it has to be called balanced.
But there are also a number of other reports reaching similar conclusions, namely by the Council of Europe, by the EU Commission, etc. How come almost all of them basically reach the same conclusion?
You know, I can't help it, to be honest. I can't help it, and I can't understand either. That must be purely political and ideological approach. You know, I don't understand why, if a media represents conservative approach, is being immediately called as a slave media. If a media outlet represents liberal approach, it's free and independent. We could only get rid of the communists a little bit more than 30 years ago. The Hungarian people would absolutely not be ready to tolerate any government which would jeopardize their rights, the freedom rights of them, even to a small extent. So if we were like how we are described in liberal media, for example, or how we are described by some fellow politicians in the European Union, we would be thrown out by the people in Hungary, because they would never tolerate such a government as we are described. You know.
Not only freedom of press, but Hungary's democracy in general is being questioned. Freedom House, an independent NGO, goes so far as to say that Hungary can no longer be considered a fully democratic country. And also a democracy index done by the University of Gothenburg, based upon hundreds of indicators and thousands of experts around the world, come to the same conclusion. What is your reaction to that? How does it resonate with you?
Unfortunately, I have to take it into consideration as an insult, because questioning the maturity and the nature of the Hungarian democracy is unacceptable, because if the maturity of the democracy is being questioned, then basically the love of the people towards democracy is being questioned, because we have won 3 continuous elections. People support what we have been doing, and ones might like it or not like it, because this is politics, but the democratic nature of what we are doing cannot be questioned, because democracy means that what the government does is based on the authorization of the people. I never feel like judging other countries. You know, to be honest, how the status of democracy in Sweden is, I don't care, to be honest, because it's the Swedish people who should care about that. And if the Swedish people does not like that someone can be a prime minister in Sweden even with 1/4 of the votes of the members of the parliament, I have my opinion about that, but who cares? I'm not a Swedish.
Today, EU's Advocate General concluded that EU power to withhold funds over rule of law concerns is legal.
I think it's very anti-European, and I tell you why. Because when it comes to the funds of the European Union, the funds are being put together by the people. It doesn't fall down from the sky, or it's not just created by itself. It is being put together by the European people, including the Hungarians. So Hungary is contributing to the economic performance of the European Union. There are many Swedish, German, French, Italian companies making huge profits on our market, taking away part of it back to Sweden, back to Germany, back to France, back to Italy. Our growth rate is much higher than the European average. Our unemployment rate is much lower than the European average. So we contribute to that. This means that this money is partly ours as well. And not giving this money to us just because of political and ideological debates, that's unacceptable.
Mr. Foreign Minister, Hungary and the EU have been at loggerheads for many years now over democracy issues such as press freedom, freedom of speech, election laws, the independence of the judiciary, migration, and so on. issues where EU bodies as well as heads of states clearly say that you are going against the core values of the Union. Why do you want to remain a member of an organization like the EU when you don't share the values, or at least interpret them in a very different way? Why not leave?
We do share the values. What we understand is that the European institutions are violating some values based on which the European Union was funded. Now we are fighting for these values. So, of course, our place is in the European Union. That has never been a question in Hungary.
The EU clearly expects Hungary to abide by EU statutes. Do you expect the EU to eventually give in?
Yeah, definitely. EU should change in order to be stronger. As long as there's a conservative government in Hungary, and as long as international liberal mainstream is ruling the European Union, we definitely will not have an ideological, let's say, consensus. But when it comes to the modus operandi, when it comes to the operation of the European Union, when it comes to making EU successful, there we can work together, no question.
Thank you very much. Very nice to talk to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the invitation.